Lubitsch from TV. We're here with artist and organizer Christopher Brown, otherwise known as ThoughtPoet, and we're going to discuss the protests that have been going on in Chicago over the past week. So thank you so much for being with us today. So how long have you been organizing in Chicago?
So I would definitely say for myself, I was raised around the arts. So like learning, the principles of Langston Hughes, and learning how Nina Simone and Dr. King and Malcolm X, how like the artist community also helped a great deal with the organizing that was going on. So going forward from there, I would say I really got into organizing around the time the Laquan McDonald video dropped. I would say I joined BYP 100 a little after that. But I would say as far as when I started organizing, it was around that time, like for sure.
So, I mean, in terms of the protests, we know that the police killing of George Floyd was kind of the catalyst for these uprisings, but can you just give us a little insight into like the bigger picture? Because we've seen so much momentum around these, and not just in the United States, but globally now. So can you just talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I mean, thing is, from Breonna Taylor to George Floyd, it really did not start with just George Floyd, even though it somehow feels like that right now. Really, it started with Laquan McDonald. It started with Takia Holmes. It started with Rekia Boyd. All of these individuals, their lives being taken by the most notorious gang in the world. Those were more than the moments that started what's going on right now. I would say what happened, unfortunately, to George Floyd and his family, I would say it was kind of a tipping point, on top of the fact that Black and brown bodies have been mistreated severely throughout this quarantine. So whether it's, police brutality, or the low resources of jobs, or the lower resources in general, I would say what's been going on has definitely been taking place way longer than now. I think if anything, people are paying attention. I feel like even though we tried our very best when we were working on the No Cop Academy campaign, which is still in place, I feel like folks were not taking us seriously and realizing that $33 to $95 million for a cop academy is absurd, considering the fact that we have no resources for nonprofits and mental health institutions. And just like the list goes on as far as where that money could go. And the fact that $1 to $4 million is spent a day on policing and just resources for the police, which again is absolutely absurd, just because this entire city could be using those resources for something completely different. And that's why our one of our goals is to defund police, just because they have not brought any protection to any Black or brown lives. They have not helped any Black or brown lives, and if anything, systematic oppression is what has even brought any Black or brown folks into wanting to be a police officer. And so I think when we talk about the bigger picture, we have to realize that everything that's taking place is because of systematic oppression that has been on minority identified folks. So even with looting, most folks are like upset because Black businesses are being destroyed, and the looting is happening out south and out west. But I think what people aren't thinking about is the fact that when everything happened, the mayor of this city shut down one of the most essential ways of travel for Black and brown bodies in the south and west sides of Chicago. So even if you weren't necessarily looting, or if you weren't, protesting, and you had to just go to work, you did not have access. And I know a lot of folks have the privilege to a vehicle. And so CTA was that main way of them, getting from one place to another. So you take poverty level individuals that have been struggling for 3 months since this quarantine, and you tell them, we want you to stay in your house. We know that we took away your jobs because we cannot, do our job to officially make sure that our country is running healthily. But we don't want you to loot. We don't want you to destroy anything. But if your family has been destroyed because of police brutality, we want you to understand that we don't care. And I think that's kind of, if not the biggest reason why all of this is happening, because we have been shown in more ways than one that our bodies, our lives are not as important as a building that belongs to probably one of the worst presidents we have probably ever had, I want to say, since Nixon and Bush themselves. So, yeah, I know that was a lot.
And so you personally were arrested at
Yes.
one of these protests. So if you're comfortable sharing your story, I think our viewers would appreciate that.
Yeah. So to let it be known, the goals of that protest were not to necessarily supervise folks from looting. The goal was not to arrest or de-arrest anyone that was at that protest. The goal was to spread awareness around the fact that we are upset and that we are, not backing down from, what we're asking for. And so throughout that entire protest, we went, we literally just marched down 53rd. And once we got closer to the lakefront, we had another peace circle. And in that peace circle, after the peace circle ended, because what most people don't know is that the protest had already ended. And so as majority of the audience was, beginning to disperse, there were maybe 15 to 25 of us that were about to walk back down 53rd, to which 12 basically created a standoff between us and themselves. So there were about 30 to 40 police officers armed with shields and police sticks and helmets. And I also want to say tear gas. And we were simply asking for them to, step aside so that we can basically go home. Because that was literally the only goal, was for us to go home. And so there were some scuffles where 12 did get very violent with us. And we stood our ground for about half an hour to 2 hours, just sitting in one spot because 12 refused to basically step aside. And so when they finally did step aside, we were doing exactly what we said we were going to do, which was to go home. Also because curfew was also slowly, creeping upon us as well. And so going further back into Hyde Park, so 53rd and Lake Park, that's when police started running back towards the 53rd and Lake Park area and began to harass different folks, comrades, or just like folks that came out for the march in general. And so at that moment, that's when we started to practice de-arrest skills and basically protect anyone that was there. And so I know for myself, what I was doing there was trying to protect anyone that was around me and my comrades, to which we were all severely beaten with police sticks. Some of my comrades have a concussion right now. I definitely have bruises and I need to go to the doctor myself to check and make sure that nothing's sprained or broken. And I guess the best way to explain it is literally seeing yourself on the ground, not knowing if you're going to be alive after a group of people basically, excuse my French, beat the hell out of you. And so that's what myself and 3 other individuals experienced. And I mean, the amount of trauma that is centered around this is almost like it's just insane, just because, again, none of my comrades, none of the folks that were arrested in that protest were quote unquote looting. We weren't doing anything, for lack of a better word, but we were still arrested because we chose to protect other folks that were around us. And that is the entire point of all of this, is that 12 does not care if you are trying to protect someone. They do not care if you are simply a bystander. They do not care if you have a GPA and a $40,000 a year job as a Black or brown individual. If you are in the wrong place at the wrong time, you will possibly lose your life. And in that entire situation, there were white police officers that literally dogpiled on Black and brown women, specifically trans and femme-identified individuals. And again, that's the entire problem, is that the property and the money that is quote unquote being brought into different areas of this city is more important than Black and brown bodies. And that's why the looting is still continuing. That's why the protests are still continuing, because we understand that the mayor does not care about our lives. We understand that this president, we understand that this system does not care about if we live or die. So we are no longer going to sit and continue to obey society's laws in order to basically let Chicago keep up face. We're not going to continue to do that. And yeah, like from there, like I said, we were both swiped up. We were taken to the 51st and Wentworth precinct. I know for a matter of 2 to 3 hours, no one knew where we were. Specifically me, no one knew where I was. Literally, and I'm not sure what you believe in as far as faith and spirituality, but it was literally a work of God that I did. Like it was knowledge that I was in jail, just because everything that happened that day, everything that could have happened to anybody that is Black and brown that has been arrested happened to me. Where I was arrested, no one knew where I was, and no one knew where I was almost until I got out. So that was almost 12 hours of no one knowing where I was. And that is, again, something that's very typical when it comes to quote unquote civil unrest, is that we have children. And mind you, majority of this looting is happening by children and folks that are in like desperate need of resources, of food, of, hygiene needs. Like that is why they're doing this looting. But what happened to me can happen to anyone. And it doesn't even have to be at a protest. It could be on your front porch. It could be you being in an Uber. It could be you going to the corner store in your neighborhood. And it is just that easy for a Black and brown person to no longer exist because 12 deems it so. And so, from there, praise God, I was unleashed. But again, this is something that happens to so many other people. And our job is to shed light on the bigger picture, as we've been talking about, and realize that it's not about the looting. It's not about the protests. It's about the fact that we do not feel safe in this country that we are in. And we have been feeling like that for a while. And we have been shown many, many, many examples of how folks do not care about our lives.
So can you comment on police tactics? Because especially the widespread use of tear gas that we see around the country in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic, which obviously is a respiratory illness. So to just comment on that if you can.
Yeah, so, I mean, tear gas, to be completely honest with you, is unfortunately the very least of anyone's issues when it comes to you know, showing up to protest something in these last couple of days. You have police officers that have had, I don't know the exact term for it, but the metal police sticks, which if it hits you, not only is that going to cause severe damage, but it probably will break a limb or something. You've had police officers that have used rubber bullets. You've had police officers that use extreme powerful force, knowing that us as civilians, we cannot truthfully fight back, because all that will do is just, you know, create a longer rap sheet for us. So in being arrested, you have to worry about, you know, not being able to breathe. You have to worry about your organs. You have to worry about, you know, your personal being. And you have to worry about if you're actually going to make it to the precinct alive, which is the reason why years ago, the Let Us Breathe Collective created the Freedom Square campaign, just because that was the home of one of the worst police torture sites that probably exists in this entire city. And going to what you were saying as far as, I'm sorry.
Can you talk a little bit more about the Let Us Breathe Collective?
Yeah, so I mean, in my opinion, the Let Us Breathe Collective is one of the most powerful collectives that exist in terms of reparations and fighting for liberation for Black and brown bodies. They have done work in Ferguson. They have been doing work even before Ferguson. They have done work in so many of the campaigns that have taken place in this city. So from the Say Her Name campaign to the Buy Anita campaign, to the No Cop Academy campaign. But they are more than just an organization that protests and organizes. They do their damn best to clothe and feed folks that are in the community, so the back of the yards community, and even further. They are constantly teaching restorative and transformative tactics as far as, you know, how to de-escalate situations in communities. They've even gone as far to teach folks medical skill assets. So if someone was to be shot, the ambulance can come, but you would already have folks in that space that would be equipped with treating a gunshot wound. And I mean, the list just goes on. And so with Freedom Square, and again, and that's why I keep saying, like, this work is nothing new. Like these interviews, everything I'm saying is kind of being repeated, just because, you know, Damon Williams, Christiana Ray Colon, Jennifer, who do I say her last name right? Jennifer Pagan. They have been doing this work. BYP has been doing this work. Asada's Daughters, BYP 100, Good Kids, Mad City, Broadway Youth Center, True Star Magazine. They have been doing this work as far as informing and educating folks in these communities to better take care of the communities that we are a part of. And so with the Freedom Square action, the goal was to bring awareness and take up space in one of the most brutalized spaces for Black and brown bodies in this city. And so that's why, you know, in the present state, you know, what's taking place with young folks, you know, being swiped up and no one knowing where they are, or them leaving precincts and not having access to lawyers. Therefore, you know, they may or may not even go to their court date, which issues a warrant for arrest, which issues more Black and brown bodies being put into prisons. And all of that, everything I just said, is the most terrible way to live. And most white allies and most white folks could not imagine what we go through on a daily basis, which is why, unfortunately, with this quarantine taking place and, you know, some folks saying like, oh, I don't know how I'm going to pay my bills, or, you know, my savings are almost up, or, you know, I don't know how we're going to get food in the house because, you know, we're not working and we don't have access to stores. This is what Black and brown people go through 24/7. And yet we still manage to make Christmas pretty okay for our youth. You know what I mean? So yeah,
And so, I mean, I think going forward, so what are the demands of BY 100?
So some of the demands that we are asking for is that we are to defund the police and not to reform them because the issues being rooted in the entire system, which is why we're not asking for reform. Another demand is that many protesters are still being detained, like in this very moment. And we are very unaware of their names. We're unaware of how to get them, assistance or even get them in contact with their families. So we're asking that their loved ones be released. We are also asking for the ability to clean up the communities and not be escalated by the police. Again, we know that our south and west sides of Chicago, 9 times out of 10, when the reconstruction of this city starts, the south and west sides of Chicago will not be thought about. I live in West Inglewood right now, and on Racine, there's been a corner store that's been burned down, and there's also been a gas station that's burned down. And when, the building starts, we are not going to see immediate results in these areas, which is why we are asking that we will clean up these spaces, but we are also asking that we are not messed with. Also, we are asking that trans lives and femme-identified people are being lifted and that they are always being uplifted. Unfortunately, we've had trans-identified Black women that have unfortunately lost their lives in a couple of days that things have been taking place. So we're asking for those folks to, have their moment and, let their name be heard. And yeah, most importantly, we are asking that the 95 or 33 to 95 million dollars that was going to be the budget for the new cop academy in this city. So we're asking that that budget is taken and used to fund different nonprofit organizations throughout the city. We're asking that that budget is used to rebuild the south and west sides of Chicago. We're asking that that budget is used to basically rebuild CPS, because as of right now, CPS is just a complete mess. And we are asking that that those funds are used to better Chicago and to not continue to put more danger into our communities.
And so actually, so in terms of CPS, so CPD and CPS, or CPS is a $33 million contract with CPD. So are there any demands regarding the termination of that contract?
Yes, definitely the termination of the contract. But again, going back to what I just said before, putting those funds into the schools, the many schools that have been shut down throughout this entire city. Unfortunately, I live right down the street from a school that was shut down. And again, these communities need these schools. And unfortunately, when these schools are shut down, that means that you are putting Black and brown bodies in different areas where, unfortunately, gang territory comes up, and you make it harder for folks to, be able to really navigate their daily lives because of, drastic and impromptu transitions because of schools being shut down. And yeah, I mean, it's almost like when we ask of these demands or when we say these demands, these are very simple things, right? Like I was just in, I think Orland Square yesterday, like getting some things for my family, and that entire community is like perfectly fine. Like you have, booming businesses, despite the fact that this quarantine's been taking place. You have folks that can literally walk in and out of stores and in and out of their houses and not feel threatened. And there was not any security guards. There were not any police guarding different businesses or stores. Like, you truly could sit at a restaurant on their patio, whether you want to or not, and, be comfortable. And we're asking for the same thing in the South and West Sides of Chicago. I feel like these demands are not only things that we deserve, but these are things that should have been taking place like 10 seconds ago.
And so in terms of defunding the police, what does that look like? And does something like CPAC, the Civilian Police Accountability Council, does that start to deal with the problem?
Yes, CPAC definitely does help with the problem. But to be completely honest with you, when we say defund the police, once again, $1 to $4 million a day goes into funding the police. So whether that goes to more defense resources they use, or if it goes into people's pensions or paychecks, or even the fact that there's an entire bank that is designed for when a police officer takes someone's life, they are literally funded for their paid time off. We no longer want these perspectives to exist. If anything, defunding the police means that the resources and the money that is being put into that business, into that game, is being put into these communities. We are more than able to use those resources to create protective situations where the community feels safe, and it not only is safe, but it's protected by its own community. I feel like in any white suburb or community, the neighborhood watch is more than just the neighborhood watch. Like, they actually have resources to, quell down situations if they were to arise. And we're saying we want the same thing. And again, because we do not feel safe by the police, mostly because on any given day, the police consist of power-hungry, toxic masculine energies that show you every time that they interact with you that there is no emotional intelligence. Because again, if there was emotional intelligence, you would know not to put your knee into someone's neck as you already have them pinned down to the ground. Like I say, these are things that, are like they've been said before, like they've been reiterated countless times before. I know I'm definitely not the first person from BYP 100 to state these things. And again, going back to what you said earlier about like why is now so different than before, you're looking at communities that are literally on their last leg. You know what I mean? So like, from like, if we're able to work, we don't say much, but not only have we not been able to work, but we have been detained in our communities for 3 months. And now you're telling us that we can no longer even travel because of the fact that folks are showing the folks that govern them that we are tired of being killed by you. That is not only toxic, but this is something that has been ongoing for years. And this is the reason why the police need to be defunded. Because again, the fact that whether people believe that they have some type of value or not, they do not have value in communities for minorities.
Well, do you have any final thoughts for our viewers?
Yes. So I would, and I think I may have spoke to this earlier, but going into the looting and going into the protests and going into what's going on right now, I know a lot of folks, their anger is displaced right now because they feel that the looting is the worst thing that could happen to the communities. But you have to understand that genocide of Black people and brown people is a billion times more important. And the fact that folks have to literally explain that human lives are more important than a building is completely disgusting. It's almost as if someone's been poking you with a stick for like hours, and you've been trying to tell them in the very best way possible, can you please stop? Like, this hurts. I'm uncomfortable. And they just keep telling you, like, yeah, I'm going to keep doing this because I can and I will, and you can do nothing about it. And you're going to get to a point where it's like, all right, well, let me take this stick and do the same thing to you and maybe hit you over the head with it. And it's like, oh, well, why are you, why is this your response to me? And it's like, well, I've been telling you for the past couple of hours, please stop. Please don't do this. This makes me uncomfortable. This is hurting me. I do not feel comfortable. I truly want you to stop. And what is being said is not being heard. So if anything, the response to all of this is what you would expect, with so many lives taken by police, and we're just being told the same exact thing, that you have to understand that the law is the law, you have to abide by the law, but that same law is killing us. So, yeah.
Well, thank you so much for talking with us today, and thank you for sharing your personal story and the demands of the IP 100. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. I truly appreciate your time.
Bye.